Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the McNally Robinson Booksellers is located here in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, of course, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Rooster Town. I'm delighted to welcome you all here, both in person and virtually, for the launch of Oubliette by Hannah Godfrey. In the words of the publisher, Nevermore Press, Oubliette holds the charming quips and reminiscences of a mother and the anticipatory grief of her daughter. Hannah Godfrey collected scraps of conversations and recollections she shared with her mum during the last years of her life, and in the same notebook she kept quotes from films and books that articulated the terrible sadness of losing a loved one to a horrible illness. Sweet, funny, and devastating, Oubliette is a poignant, partial portrait of two people who loved each other wonderfully and irreplaceably. That exceedingly accurate description is from the publisher, and we're so very grateful to all of Nevermore Press for helping to make this evening possible, and for publishing such wonderful books. Oubliette is also deeply beautiful, both within and without. I've always personally found Godfrey's work, critical and otherwise, to be nourishing in every possible sense of the word. And this small book, a work of elegiac celebration, is a work of great wit, great care, and boundless affection. And it's a huge privilege to play a minor role in welcoming Oubliette into the world. There'll be a reading just to my left, and that'll be followed by a conversation. That in turn will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions if you'd like. So please do let those percolate over the course of the evening. If you do have a question, just put up your hand and I'll run over to you dramatically with this microphone. That's not to comment on your ability to project your voice. It just ensures that those watching at home can hear your question. And if you are one of those people watching on YouTube, please feel free to write any questions or comments you might have in the chat, and we'll put them to the author as time permits. We have the ideal guide through the conversation this evening. Your host for tonight, Courtney R. Thompson, has been published in Border Crossings and Art in Print, among other art publications. She has an MA in Art History, Theory, and Criticism from the School of the Art Institute, Chicago. Hannah Godfrey, / Hannah G, is a writer, artist, and climate change coach living in Winnipeg, Treaty 1 territory. She is also the curator of Gallery Buehler Gallery in St. Boniface Hospital. Her work is informed by reverence, recollection, and encounters with contemporary art. Hannah's previous publications include the chapbook, Not for the World Would I Compare It to Anything, and the incredible book, Critical Fictions. Please join me in welcoming Hannah Godfrey.
Go on then. Okay, well, my name is Courtney R. Thompson, and I have known Hannah for more than a decade. We have been colleagues, we are friends, we have also edited one another's work, written together, sat together, talked about our writing. We have very different approaches to writing as well, and I've always benefited from her kind voice, and I'm not sure if she's benefited so much from my harsh one, but it is a great friendship that we share over writing, among knowing other personal details. Another thing we share that you might not know is both of our mothers had long-term illness. So this book is also very resonant with me and its topic. And so over the years, Hannah and I have had many conversations about these mothers in our lives that we did not know other than through one another. So I think this is a great way to start this conversation for you to get to know this relationship through Hannah's writing. So maybe if we could start that off, and then Hannah, if you wanted to start with a short reading. So is that what we discussed?
I have no memory, but yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to call you CT because that's what I call you. Thank you, CT. And also, before I give start the reading, I'd like to thank John at McNally, who is such an excellent host and is so supportive with putting these events on. Yes, so thank you ever so much, John. You make me feel very cared for. And thank you everyone for for coming out. It's so nice to see you all. It was not, thanks. It's great. And thank you to people who are tuning in via the interweb. So this book, published by Nevermore Press over in Lunenburg. I'll read you the introduction to the book. Oubliette. I needed somewhere to put my grief, not to hide it away and forget, but articulate it, record it, preserve this preciously awful time. It was the grief before mourning, the grief before the death had occurred. Anticipatory, a thing in itself. My mum and I spoke every day for years. She advised me, made me laugh, had unshakable belief in me and my sister. She was whimsical, coquettishly bawdy, innocent, wise, kind, wry, funny, irrepressibly helpful. She loved unconditionally, stubborn, fearful, brave. She found delight and wonder easy to come by. She amazed my sister and I by not shedding a tear at things other people wept over: school plays, sad films, bad news. I'm crying inside. The problem with a list like this is that it's never complete. She was ill for many years. She was well for many, many more before. Throughout them all, she was full of life and love. A few years ago, I read Roland Barthes' beautiful Morning Diary, a repository of his thoughts and feelings after his mother died. I began to make notes about my own pain, as well as some of the things my mum said and the memories she shared. Things I did not want to forget. Is that another one for the book? What should I do now?
Well, why don't we start with the title of the book, Oubliette. So a tertiary Google search will usually lead tales of an oubliette being a sort of medieval torture place that's associated with horror. It was a space where folks were sort of put away under grates in a very small contained space and sort of present while things went, events, activities above them. It's a sort of prison. And I thought of this as an interesting idea to frame the book, because of course my mind immediately goes to the horrors of it and the Horror Film Club shout out here, Blair. But there is that sort of physicality to that space and to the association with that medieval thing, which I think in thinking through grief, there is this sort of physical response and there is this part to it. But what I am sort of interested in is how you've got to this title for the book, when I find your book is quite hopeful. There are some very sad parts and passages in it, but there's also, again, as been mentioned, funny things that I think counter this sort of act of forgetting. So maybe you could speak a little bit about the title and how you came to it.
Sure, yeah. It was through Jay Halberstam and their book, The Queer Art of Failure. And I think it's the quote before quote in the book. Small windowless cells, or oubliettes, places in medieval fortresses where prisoners were thrown and then forgotten. And it just, it resonated with me and the experience of grief and this feeling of kind of being enclosed by it and trapped by it. and a sense of being forgotten, but that when it's that thing when someone who loves you and who you love, when they die, it's like a really profound kind of forgetting, or you're lost forever. Like the memories that they have of you, the memories that your mum might have of you, they're gone. And so that's a very, it's like being kind of trapped in that as well. I'm interested though about the great and this idea of things happening around as well, because it's the thing of the things happening around, like people who have experienced grief and bereavement and mourning. There can be that sense of separateness and isolation, and that can be, but the grief colours everything, and it's something I've been thinking about, and sort of it came to me in other conversations, was grief. It's like when you're falling in love, and when you're listening to a really terrible song being played on the radio or whatever, and suddenly, because you're falling in love, it's like, oh, that song. Or everything is kind of coloured by it, like the sunset. Oh, it's a sunset, I'm in love, and everything's wonderful because of this feeling. It permeates everything, and grief is very similar in that it heightens, it emphasises the experiences that are around you and that you're having. So it's interesting how those two things.
And I'm thinking about a specific sort of how you set things up in the book, and I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to take a gander through it, but there's some interesting juxtapositions in the text, and it's sort of interesting that you brought up that example of this sort of interdependence of memory, and sort of these sort of memories that are lost when a person is lost, but also these associations you have at certain times and places with certain folks, where it does sort of hang over you, both in like lovely ways and also really sad ways. And the specific pairing that I was interested in, where I feel like this is really illustrative, is on page 50 and 51, if you want to read it.
Sure. Okay. Pages 50 and 51. The first is a quote by David Abram, and it's from a book, What Colour is the Sacred? Reciprocally mnemonic, experientially coupled in a process of mutual invocation. And then on the opposite page, railing against her becoming a memory. I want her present, making the present now and into our future. Well, it's funny because when this book, all of the quotes in the book, except for a couple, and Sparky the publisher would know more than me, but they are the order that they appeared in my notebook. So for 3 or 4 years, my mum had she'd had a number of near misses, and after one of these near misses, it was really hitting me very badly, and I just felt like I needed to guard against my own terrible memory and write down some of her funny things and her memories and stuff, but also it was just this, things would hit me like that quote when I was actually researching for critical fictions. And it would be these moments where the grief and the horrible feelings or the overwhelming feelings were articulated, and it was like an incision which allowed the grief to kind of come out. And so I just wrote them in this notebook, just one after the other. And then when she did die, the publisher who I'd been talking to about this project asked about it and sent it to them. And so it was basically published like in the order that the quotes came to me, with 1 or 2 adjustments. I don't know whether this was one of them actually. I could give Sparky a call, but yeah.
So, but in your notebooks, so is it paired similarly then, or did you have like notebook for quotes and notebook for sort of more of your personal thoughts, or it was all
one
together?
thing, yeah.
Oh,
Just one book to plonk it all in. Yeah.
Snazzy. So I would say that that pairing has a very natural pairing. But are there any other ones in the I mean, there's quite a few in the text where I think that's a bit more opaque, and you wouldn't necessarily, you know, again, it's that sort of like the nuances for you of how you associate. Again, like if it happened to be a particular quote that struck you at a certain time, paired with a, you know, because how long of a span of period of time was this, like these notes written?
3 or 4 years, I think. Yeah, maybe, yeah, 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
So is there maybe another interesting pairing that you could read? It's a bit more opaque, but also has sort of an interesting story in terms of the place you were at, whether emotionally or even physically, because I know within that 3 or 4 years you likely traveled, you were in other spaces and places thinking through this.
Gosh, I mean, honestly, I can't really remember where a lot of these quotes, when they happened. I mean, some of them I can identify, like A.O. Roberts, magical desire inherent to mourning, to impossibly undo that which is done. And so that speaks to the research that I was doing at the time. Yeah, there's not a lot of I don't really know how they pair, honestly. I mean, actually, now I'm looking at this one, it's kind of funny. There is a pairing with this one, which wouldn't be obvious at first. So on one side, sobbing and talking to her, a mess. Sorry, 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 sorry. No sorries, darling. Hugging the cushion she made me because she told me to, saying it was her giving me a hug, trying to remember happy memories, consumed by crying. Then, brushing my teeth, wondering if 2 minutes had passed. And then on the other side, there's a quote from Tracy Emin, an art piece that she made for the Paralympics in London in 2012. You inspire me with your determination, and I love you. And it was, I used to have it hanging in my bathroom, actually, where I normally brush my teeth if I'm not prowling around my apartment. Yeah, and she had got that when she'd gone to the Paralympic Games, and she was always very pleased when she would see that in the bathroom, because I'd be like Skyping with her, take it with me everywhere. I mean, we talked every day. She was very present in my life. I put her in my top pocket and bike around with her. She was always the first person who saw the exhibitions at ACE when I was working at ACE. Yeah, I'm going to be going on tangents with this, so
That's okay. We're eating up the time. It's all good.
all right. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I find it's funny, like seeing you all here. There are people here who I've had conversations with about Mum and told some of the stories. She was a very funny person. And so it's kind of, I was actually incredibly nervous to be doing this here tonight with all of you, because I know that I have, well, one, I'd convinced myself that no one would come. And then two, just knowing that I've shared things with you, and so it makes it a little bit more real, and in like intimate, but in a kind of like, holy shit, this is intimate kind of way. Yeah. Stop
Well, he said questions at 7:30.
We got 3 minutes.
Okay. Can you tell us about the cover?
Sure, yeah, it's well, there's a quote about it actually. So it's of Desert Rose. My mum loved to travel, but she could only do that in later in her life when she'd got like a solid job. And it's sort of yeah, she'd go on these trips with my godmother, and they went to Tunisia, and she was I don't know where they were, but she was saying, oh my Hannah, there were like all of these desert roses, these like amazing geological formations all over the ground, and I was the only one looking at them. No one else seemed to care. And my mum also, which is probably bad actually, she probably shouldn't have done this, but whenever she travelled, she'd always like bring back improbably large objects with her. So she brought back a couple of these desert roses, one for me and one for my sister. But she brought back like 5 tagines from Morocco, 5 massive mortar pestles from Thailand. Like she was just like on a mission to put things in our homes. And then one year, I think it was probably for her, I don't know, one of her birthdays, I got her a desert rose necklace. Yeah, and so desert roses just became this other thing, because she would always take the first roses from her garden, or she'd always put flowers in one of my sister's room whenever my sister and I came home. And so it just sort of became this thing. But she was allergic to anything that wasn't gold, which is hilarious. And so it was just it's a very loaded object. But yeah, the sparkly over it, Nevermore, did a really lovely job of bringing that in. And it's a nice image anyway to look at, but when you read the book, then you get these different layers. You get these different layers with the image. Yeah.
I think question time? Question time?
Absolutely. If there is anyone here who happens to have a question, please feel free to raise your hand.
No pressure.
No.
I can just also read. If you do think of something, then just keep it to yourself, yeah? At art school, mum, 18, she was very shy. Like she was very, very nervous person, but lovely. At art school, mum, 18, discovered a pool in the basement. She asked an old man who was Greek and worked there to teach her to swim. He called her Pinky because her swimming costume was pink. He'd walk alongside her with a pole as she swam, not letting her touch the pool's side. 20 minutes, a rushed lesson during her lunch breaks. One of her teachers thought she was a champion in training, didn't penalise her for occasional lateness. She didn't disenchant him. My mum was very into not disenchanting people. There's a lot of stories in here which are part of like the family folklore, and this is something I became aware of with this book after it was like a book, was like, oh, this is a repository, well actually just before it, this is a repository of like family lore and family memories and things which are important to the family. And so there sort of came a responsibility, and I still talk to mum, and it's like, I don't know if any of you have this, I don't hear her voice, but I can feel her voice. And so I talked to her about stuff, and I was talking to her about this, and she was reminding me of a couple of things to add to it. So actually those were added at different points in the text, like something about my brother-in-law, he's really like my brother. Yeah, her voice is very, very present. I'll read you a couple of other things. She doesn't want to leave us. Sometimes I'm pulling her out of the bog. Sometimes she's pulling me in. What are you going to do this afternoon? I shall contemplate my nether regions. Let me see. She's persuaded her best friend, my godmother, Maggie, who is terrified of heights, to go on a hot air balloon ride in Egypt. At dawn, oh my God, she told this story. It was so funny how she'd tell it. Be darling. Well, we'd gone on the Nile, and I'd accepted a glass of mint tea from the felucca man. It was very ill-advised. I had terrible tummy all night, darling. Oh, it was awful. Didn't get any sleep. It's churning. So I really wanted to go on the balloon ride. And also, my mum's scared of heights as well. She was like, I'm going to do this. And so she put on every single pair of knickers that she owned, all of the pairs of trousers that she had, it's about 3 or 4 trousers that she had with her, and she wrapped a jumper, a brown jumper, around her waist, just to try and really make sure if anything's coming out, it's getting held in. Anyway, so they were picked up from the hotel, got into, I don't know, I think it was a Land Rover, got into the Land Rover, and it was pre-dawn, they're bumping around, and they got to the site, and she was like, Hannah, there it was a hot air balloon, it was beautiful colours, it was so big and beautiful, and a big basket underneath it, and it looked magnificent, and it was tethered to a very small donkey. Okay, so they got on the hot air balloon, and Maggie just stayed in the middle of the hot air balloon, wasn't looking up the sides, and Mum was enjoying herself, but also extremely buttoned down. And then something happened where they had a bit of a funny landing, where they ended up taking out a field of sugar cane, sugar beets. It's a bit of a crash landing, and everybody kind of fell out of the basket, and they were dancing around, and she did her kind of like, not crying inside, but dancing inside. She was like, I really wanted to die, but I just couldn't. I couldn't trust the elastic. So she had all of these funny stories. And also, like, maybe some of you are familiar with people, I think it happens when you reach a certain age. So this would be Mum. Darling, you know the lady who lived on the corner? No. She had children. They were grown up when you were little. She had dark hair. She was quite quiet. No. She lost her son. She grew flowers. She was older than me. She knew Nana and Grandad? No. Dead. Mum, every time, tell me something nice to balance it out. Whenever she would begin a story like, do you remember blah blah? I'd be like, oh, no. There's always this like long rain. I'll finish with this quote. You know, Marisa came in with a lovely smile on her face, and I thought, I bet you don't feel like wearing that. Hannah, do you think I'm out of the woods? I think the woods will always be close now. Better go in for deforestation then, haven't I? Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Are there questions?
And if there are no questions, that is a truly lovely place to put it. Oh, we do have one question over there. Yes.
Hi, Hannah.
Oh, hi.
Thank you so much, and congratulations. I'm curious how much your mom knew while you were writing this about it, and if she inserted herself into the book, you know, purposefully, indirectly, anything in that realm?
Thank you, Sarah. She did know about it, but she didn't, I mean, I didn't intend to publish it. And I didn't tell her that it was a way of dealing with and like grief and horrible feelings. But she knew that I'd write down some of the funny things that she would say. And she was just sort of gleeful about it. She just was sort of incredulous, like, are you really going to write that down? Or is that one for the book? And so it was just like a game. It was just really sweet. It was really sweet how she'd just be, have this very kind of like, I mean, sort of maybe a funny word to use, but this kind of like innocent, childlike happiness. Like that something she said was like, oh, it's going to go in the book. Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah. And I sort of checked about doing the book with my sister, because I didn't feel like I could put something like this out in the world without my big sister being all right with it. And she could definitely hear that gleefulness, and hopefully with people who read the book, when you hear or when you read her voice, maybe you'll feel her voice because you can't hear her voice, but maybe you'll feel her voice, that gleefulness and sweetness that she had. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello.
I was wondering if you still have a practice of recording some of these memories as she speaks to you and you feel her, or if you have a new book a new journal that you're filling up, or I'm sure it's ongoing as these things come to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, that's actually no, I haven't thought to do that. I mean, I have such a bad memory that making this book was really important for me to be able to keep connected to her. And when I do talk to her, like I mean, you know, at the beginning I was making up, just chat with my mum, but it's actually it can be quite difficult as well. And it's like I often have to get through a lot of feelings, which traditionally my people aren't very good at. Yeah, I hadn't thought to write them down actually. That's an interesting idea, because I will forget them and they'll be lost with me. And actually I have this thing which I do for my niece and nephew, where probably about 10 years ago, I decided that I was going to write to them as if they're adults in this book, and writing to them like when I was in my 30s, so they could read me when I was in my 30s, and we could almost have like a conversation across time and space. And so I guess I have been thinking about, and in that was very consciously recording things about my family and my sister and stuff like that. I guess repositories of memories. Perhaps that's something which is actually really important to me, which I haven't thought of until now. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah.
We did have a question online, and Susan was wondering about a possible evolution of the text. She asks, do you see this book in any way becoming a two-person theatrical event, perhaps as a fringe performance or public conversation?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Susan. Before this was even like a thing, I had been thinking about doing like a one-woman show, because especially during like the first year of COVID, my ma and we just had the best time. It was hilarious. She'd be like, I'd get her on the Skype, and she'd be on the whatever it's called, the iPad, and she'd be like, darling, let's look at some clothes. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like propping her against my chest so that she can see the laptop screen, and she's like, no, go up, darling, up. I'm like, no, my up. And I was like, okay. And she's like, no, it's right. Look at those dungarees on the right. She's like, I'm like, well, these ones. She's like, no, stage right. So she was like doing these really funny things. And we'd like cook together, and it would just be a sort of disaster. And she would, yeah, it was just hilarious. Like the flour would be going everywhere. It'd just be totally chaotic. And I'd regale friends with these stories. And so I was like, oh, this would actually, and I talked to her about that. I was like, oh, I think we could do something, this could be really funny, Ma. She was like, I don't think anyone would want to watch it. I was like, no, they would. This is really funny. So yeah, it's been in my mind about that, but I feel that was such a joyful time with her. Like that first year of COVID was such a joyful, weirdly joyful time of cooking and going on bike rides and growing carrots in beer boxes. Like it was really fun. And I feel, although I can remember those things, I've lost like the body feeling of joy with them. So I think if I could get that back, then maybe it would be a performance. Yeah, a bit early at the moment, I think. Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Hi,
Hello.
Hannah. You're obviously quite knowledgeable about many artistic forms. Your prose is gorgeous. I wonder why you chose this form for the book.
I think it chose me, really. It was, thank you very much. Yeah, it was really the experience of reading Roland Barthes' Morning Diary. I found it an incredibly useful way of understanding grief and being able to express grief and its staccatic nature. And was really, I was trying to read books about grief and bereavement, and the language just was like I didn't connect with it. So Roland sorted me out. He was like, I know how to do this, Hannah, why don't you listen to me? I was like, well read, thank you. So yeah, it was Monsieur Barthes. Yeah, thank you for that question.
And were there any more questions at all? If not, I wasn't sure if either of you had any closing words you might like to offer.
I think people just want to hear you read more. I don't think they want to hear my questions.
I'm just really grateful. Like it feels, I'd been very apprehensive about sharing this book and reading, and it was actually Shalak Javid who came up with the suggestion of having conversations instead of like me presenting. And that's really made this kind of bearable and also productive. But also, I just feel really grateful, honestly, to be able to talk to people and to be able to talk to everybody here. And it's like, it's kind of to have a space like this where you're talking about death and love and how horrible those things are, and also the sweetness as well feels very like sacred and sweet. So I'm really grateful to share that with all of you. So thank you very much for making the effort to come out this evening. Thank you. Yeah.
It feels quite trite to wander up to a podium and discuss signing procedure now, but thank you so very much to both of you for that incredible conversation. Thanks to all of you for your attention and your warmth and your questions. So we won't be moving along to a book signing right now, so I'd invite you all to join us and Hannah just over at a table just beside our cash desk. We have small piles of Oubliette there. There are also copies at the central cash desk. Please do feel free to visit and get a copy signed before you pay for it, but please do pay for the book before you leave the store. We're so very grateful to Nevermore Press and of course to Courtney R. Thompson for guiding us through this conversation. This is such a generous treasure of a book. So please join me one more time in thanking Hannah Godfrey.